Welcome to the Preserving Family Podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to equip you to gain insight, information, and inspiration to help you protect, teach, and guide your family during these turbulent times. Our goal is to provide tools and resources to help you strengthen and preserve your own marriages and families. Now here are your hosts, Dr. Mark and Janie Ogletree.
Everyone, welcome to our Preserving Families podcast today. I'm super excited to be here today because Colin Cole is with us. And we're going to talk about smartphones, teenagers, and social media today. And so, Colin, thank you for taking the time to come over here and be with us today.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. Tell us about yourself. I'm going to guess that a lot of our listeners may not have heard of you before.
Yeah. First and foremost, I married to an amazing wife, and we've got a almost 2-year-old daughter.
Awesome.
So just getting started into the family and having a great time.
Yeah.
I'm 28 years old, so, our topic is about social media and cell phones. I was kind of right in that middle section where I got Instagram at 14 and a cell phone at 14, and now I've interviewed thousands of parents, right, who have kids.
Right.
So kind of an interesting area, kind of in the middle, to know what it's like to grow up with it, but then also to interview a lot of parents to know what it's like to parent those kids.
Right.
So, I was one of the founding partners of Gabb, which is a kids technology company.
We love Gabb.
Yes. Yeah, we started that in 2019, and the whole idea of the company was to give an alternative to giving a 10-year-old an iPhone.
Right.
And we saw pretty early the dangers of technology and smartphones, I think kind of before mainstream media was able to figure it out.
Right.
And we were the only solution for many years.
Right.
So we have...
Now you have some competitors, right?
We do. Yeah, we've got quite a few. And we actually aren't too angry about that. We're pretty happy that there's other solutions, for kids and teens.
Right. It feels like, Colin, that our I want to say our teenagers, but really our children are starting to have phones earlier and earlier, right? And so I don't know if you guys have any data on that of what you're seeing, but what would you say is a typical age for a child or a young teenager to get a smartphone?
I remember a couple of years back, and I think it's accelerated since then. There was something crazy, like 25% of 5-year-olds had a smartphone. Which is just an insane number, right?
Right.
We recommend we have we teach what we call tech in steps. Yeah. So similar to how you would teach a kid how to swim, right? And you're not going to throw them right in the deep end. You start them with lessons and floaties, right? And you slowly progress.
Sure.
We have a cellular watch, which is meant for kids kind of 5 to 9. Which can't do a whole lot.
Right.
But it has GPS, it has calling, and then we have another phone that gives you a little bit more, and then another phone kind of 12 to 15 that gives you more than that phone.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, Colin, because I know that we are pretty versed in what the Gabb products, but I don't know if everyone is, but the whole idea of a Gabb phone is blank. What would you say?
The whole idea of a Gabb phone is to let the kids be kids.
Right.
And ultimately, when a child is looking at a screen or on a device, they're not able to be outside. That's one less hour, right, without it. So we're probably the only cell phone company on the whole planet that actually wants their product to be used as least as possible, right, as less as possible.
Counterintuitive, right, to the marketing.
Everybody wants more.
Right.
We actually are addition by subtraction.
Right.
So for our products, the average user spends about an hour a day. That's the average.
Right.
Whereas right now for kids and teens, for a kid, it's about 6 hours a day that they're spending looking at a screen.
Right.
Non-education related.
And by the way, stop and time out on that. We want everyone to know how serious that data is. But when we say 6 to 7 hours a day of media time, that's not including homework. And for adults, that's not including your work day, right? This is in addition to, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And what's crazy is the adults are kind of just as bad.
Yeah.
So, but kids, it's about 6 hours. For teenagers, it's about 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And, that's a full 8-hour workday, It's like a part-time, full-time job.
It's a full-time job, yeah. So I hate to say it this way, like, okay, so what are the restrictions of a Gabb phone? But maybe if we said, all right, here's what a Gabb phone does, you would say what?
It's a flip phone in the body of a smartphone.
Yeah.
So a flip phone, all you can do is call, text, GPS locate. We took that functionality and put it in a smartphone, which is a nice touchscreen and a nice camera.
Right.
So the kids can still take videos, they can take pictures, but we've restricted all social media, apps, anything that's wasting their time and not letting them reach their full potential.
And, you know, where Colin, I kind of got into this was recognizing as I read Jean Twinge's book, iGen.
Oh, sure.
And having her talk about the status symbol it is to have that smartphone, right?
Totally.
And if you don't have that smartphone in your hand and you're 16 years old and you have some little flip phone or whatever else, people start kind of asking questions and wondering about you, right? And so now you have the appearance, right, that you have a smartphone, but the functionality is limited, which is great.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Colin, once again, I'm so grateful that you're here. This is just a topic that I have so much interest in, not only because we have 8 children, but now because we have 30 plus grandkids, and quite a few of them are entering this age now, this 12, 13, 14 age, where it's certainly a concern for us. And so the first question I have for you, and I'll tell everyone that where Colin and I met for the first time was we have a marriage and family conference in our stake every year. And Colin was one of the speakers at our conference this year, and his topic was exactly what we're talking about today. And so, Colin, in that presentation, you talked about the dramatic remodeling of the teen brain and the surge of dopamine during adolescence. And so just tell us more about that, whatever you want to do to help us understand that connection between chemicals in the brain and a phone.
Yeah, great question. And I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about a precursor that is the reason why I studied this so in depth.
Yeah.
So in my ward, we live in Saratoga Springs, tons of youth, explosion of people over there.
Right.
We've, I think our ward is split 3 or 4 times, but our first ward, we had over 1,000 members. And
can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
And I was in the young men, and we had 18 priests. So that would be age 16, 17, 18, right?
Right.
Guess how many of the 18 priests had a driver's license or went on dates?
I'm gonna go for it and say none.
That's exactly right. And I couldn't believe that number.
Yeah.
And back when I was in high school, just 10 years ago, we couldn't wait to go on dates. We couldn't wait to get our driver's license.
Right.
So I was just really confused. And I was trying to think, what's going on, right?
Right.
What's being satisfied to where they're not interested?
Craving that, yeah.
Yeah, craving that.
I mean, I remember, Colin, actually waking up at 6 a.m. and backing my car up and down the driveway so my parents wouldn't know we were doing it when I was 14 or 15.
Yes.
And practicing parallel parking, when I was 15 out because we couldn't wait to get our driver's license, right?
Yeah, exactly. And usually you don't see these types of dramatic shifts, right? Where it's like everyone wants to do something, all of a sudden no one wants to do something.
Yeah.
Usually within trends and years, it's very gradual.
There's a slow fade,
there is some change. You rarely see hockey stick-like changes. So I started researching the brain and specifically dopamine. And going back to Jean Twenge, she's got an amazing book called Dopamine Nation.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'd recommend that everybody reads that. But what I learned about the adolescent brain and just the brain in general is that it develops back to front. So the back of the brain, that's where all of like the receptors are and emotions. And for a brain that's developing, those are firing at like 2 to 5 times the amount of a normal brain. So what that means is a kid, a child, a teen feels something so much deeper. The highs are much higher, the lows are much lower for these teenagers. And the prefrontal cortex is the last part to develop, which is at the front of the brain.
Right.
And that's where you have the long-term decision making, right? The thoughts behind that. How's this going to affect other people? For me, that's even still not fully developed. It's usually until your late 20s.
Right.
So for these kids, something that maybe wouldn't affect us too much can really, really affect them. So then it went into a study on dopamine and how that works. So then I was able to figure out that there's slow releasing dopamine and fast releasing dopamine. And we can get into this a little bit later, but the challenge for boys mostly is video games and pornography,
Right.
where for girls it's social media.
Yeah.
So you can think about those three things that would be considered fast-releasing dopamine.
Okay.
And the biggest difference is usually in the effort leading up to it.
Okay. So
you think of, right, going on social media, playing video games, not any effort, right, or sacrifice. That's fast-releasing dopamine. And what happens is everybody has a baseline level of dopamine. When you have a fast-releasing dopamine, all of a sudden it spikes, but then it immediately crashes, and you drop your baseline dopamine. So after a while of continual use, as we talked about, 6 to 8 hours a day, eventually you actually get to a spot of dopamine depletion. When you're dopamine depleted, you don't have epinephrine, which is you're wanting to do anything.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we have all of these dopamine depleted teens who just have no interest in life. Right. Honestly. And
no motivation. Yeah.
They don't see the point in any of it.
Sure.
So for them, they're like, why would I want to get a driver's license? Why would I want to go on dates? Why would I want to try in school? They just don't see that part of life because they're fully dopamine depleted, in my opinion.
Excellent. Wow. I mean, super interesting, and explains a lot.
Yeah.
It explains a lot. In fact, I just talked to someone in my counseling practice just yesterday who's about 18 years old and said the exact, almost quoted you, didn't know he was saying it, but what he was saying is, I'm not depressed, but I just have no motivation, no drive, no desire to really do anything. Right.
Yeah.
And now we know that, okay, we see where that kind of comes from, or at least where it could come from. Colin, here's my next question is, as we contrast real relationships, real competition, real romance with artificial substitutes, like social media, gaming, and pornography, are smartphones today replacing some real life growth experiences that we as humans are supposed to be having for our own development and growth?
They definitely are.
Yeah.
Our teens right now, what we're seeing is record low levels of sport involvement, musical instrument involvement, after school activity involvement.
Right.
And what's happening is we have these real world activities, which in my opinion require sacrifice, effort, and the potential of letdown.
Right.
So that could be a relationship, right, with a young man and young woman.
Right.
Could be sports, right? Could be an instrument. There's so many different things. All of those are going back to the dopamine, slow releasing dopamine.
Yeah.
And are really good developmental things. What kids right now are doing they're choosing the artificial substitute.
Yeah.
So we have all of these God-given feelings, right, of competition, of
risk taking.
Yeah, risk taking, even of like relationships, right?
Yeah.
And those feelings they're artificially being met by the substitutes. So video games, that's replacing the feelings of actual sports involvement.
Right.
Pornography is replacing, right, a real relationship.
Yeah.
And it's turning these boys into zombies, right? and girls also, but especially boys. And that's the reason why dopamine's getting depleted in these youth.
Well, and now we have church leaders speaking out about artificial intelligence, Elder Bednar and a few others, of these relationships now, that you can have a relationship with a chatbot, so to speak.
Yeah.
And once again, one of the things it eliminates the competition, the risk-taking, the putting yourself out there. I mean, I remember having to get my guts up as a 11th grader to call a girl on the phone to see if she wanted to go out. Totally. And then if she said no, it was like devastating. But you just had to deal with it, and we've taken all that out of it, haven't we?
Totally.
Not to mention, as you talked about sports, and I've done a lot of research in that area, Colin, and one of the things that the research is really clear on is that if you looked at leaders today of Fortune 500 companies, and we looked at leaders in the church, almost all of them participated in a high school sport. There are just things you learn in sports that you can't learn in other places.
Totally.
And I think the same probably is true of any extracurricular activity where you have to sacrifice, like you were saying, and put effort and energy into it. And when you take that away, zombie is probably a good word to describe some of those youth. So, all right. How about question 3? super interested in this one, but I know there's a difference. You've already kind of pointed to the difference between boys, girls / young men, young women. But talk about that for a minute. Develop that a little bit more for us of what some of the differences are when it comes to technology.
Totally. So for boys, it's mostly two issues. One is pornography, which is very widespread.
Right.
The data is hasn't been updated in a while, and I think people also are a little embarrassed to say, but from what I'd heard, what I've seen, and what I've researched, it's about 80-90% of teens are viewing it on a weekly basis.
Pornography. Wow.
That's right. And what's so scary about pornography, especially at a young age, is it can start desensitizing your brain.
Yeah.
So going back to how teens can just feel things so much more deeply, what happens is it usually starts with, soft pornography, but then they start getting used to that and don't get excited anymore. And so it needs to go more and more.
Ramp it up a little.
Yeah.
Right?
And what's scary is last year, out of the top 50 most pornographic viewed videos on the internet, 88% of them had some form of verbal or physical abuse towards women.
Yeah.
So that's what's scary, especially at a young age, is it can just keep getting worse and worse as you view it more. And then now we can see, right, what's happening, what it leads to.
Well, and one of the things we're seeing, Colin, in the group that I work with the most, which is college students, is that now there's not a real motivation or urgency at all to even date.
Totally.
Forget about getting married, just dating. We just can't.
Yeah.
We've just talked to so many girls lately that have so many things going for them, and they just can't. I mean, and they're beautiful, right? And they can't get a guy to ask them out, and I have to believe that in many cases it's because of a pornography addiction.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seems like, to me, just an observation, no data, but seems to be a lot of amazing young women and not as many amazing young men, right? There's still a lot. But the challenges for the young men are really hurting in the dating and the relationship area.
I think it does speak for sure about Satan's attack right now. I mean, of course he's attacking everyone, but his attack on young men is incredible, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we're kind of seeing that. So
totally.
What about the girls? What are they dealing with?
For girls, it's mainly social media and comparison.
Uh-huh.
They're just a lot more emotional and needing, social acceptance.
Yeah.
More so than boys.
Yeah.
And so they'll spend 6 to 8 hours a day on TikTok and Instagram.
Sure.
And you've just seen since 2012, which is the year that the front-facing camera came out on the iPhone, and also the year that Facebook acquired Instagram.
Wow.
Depression, anxiety, suicide have all 2 to 3 times for women since that time.
Well, I was going to ask, what the mental health ramifications are for this exorbitant use of social media, and you would say, "Oh, we're definitely seeing it in." You said depression, anxiety. Did you say something else?
Suicide.
Okay, yeah.
There's the saddest stat, I think, is right now in the United States, 51% of teen girls feel like their life is completely useless or pointless.
Oh my gosh!
There's just there's no reason.
No reason for living.
There. Yeah.
That's horrible, right? That's horrible. Back to Jean Twenge and her book on the iGen, but she does a great job on her research showing the incredible link between the use of smartphones and mental health, and that the healthiest teens in America are those who are spending time outdoors, who are spending time in sports, who are spending time reading. And then you look at what the correlations between, smartphones, social media, and all that stuff, and then you see the depression hitting. So it is incredible.
Yeah, it's super ironic when you think about social media and what they advertise, right?
Right.
It's like you think of Instagram and TikTok, it's all about inclusion and finding a community and happiness and joy.
Right.
And really what it does is the exact opposite. So it makes us, have we ever been more divided as a country?
No.
Have we ever hated each other that much, right? Have we ever been more desensitized to violence or other things that social media offers?
Yeah, totally true. I would agree. Colin, this leads me to another question for you. And that's when things go wrong online, when things go wrong on social media, maybe when your children, when our children recognize that maybe they're dealing with someone who's doesn't have great intentions out there. We know, I've heard you talk about sextortion before. Maybe you can kind of develop some of the problems out there that parents really should be aware of that I think a lot of them aren't.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say people, it's been talked about enough where now pornography, video games, social media, everybody knows the dangers, right? Some people choose not to listen to those dangers or they neglect them, but everybody's aware of them.
Yes.
But what I've seen in the last year, something that's really gone rampant is sextortion, which a lot of parents don't know about. So just to break it down for the listeners who may not know what it is, it's a person, usually a man, and usually from Africa.
Okay.
They're called the Yahoo Boys. They have their own group. And basically, they're able to use AI to create a fake profile of a neighboring girl in a town. Yeah. And
so here in Provo, Utah, someone who lives nearby.
That's right.
And they're doing all this from
Orem. Yeah.
A whole continent.
Exactly.
A whole continent away, right?
They're in Africa. They're trained. They're skilled. They're incentivized. They can make a year's salary in an afternoon.
Oh my gosh.
And basically what they do is they intimidate or imitate a young woman. They get a relationship with a boy, a high school boy. Yeah. They say stuff to get their trust. Huh? What's really sad is you'd think it'd be weeks and months of nurturing and relationship building. Sometimes it's like a few hours.
Oh my gosh.
And ultimately pictures are sent. The girl will
nude photos, right?
Yeah, fake nude photos. The boy will then send one back, and then a switch. And basically the guy says, actually, I'm not this girl, and you have 60 seconds to send me $1,000, or I'm going to post all of these pictures online. Yeah. And they start with really threatening texts. Right. So it's very scary, for a 14, 15, 16-year-old boy. Now all of a sudden getting a text that says 59 seconds, 58 seconds, 57, and they don't know what to do. Yeah. And they're really scared to go and
by the way, for everyone who's listening, Colin showed this actual screenshot of a phone, and they're literally saying that, right? Okay, 10 seconds now, 5 seconds. I mean, they're just counting down, aren't they?
That's right. Yep. Yeah, wow. They'll send hundreds of messages. It's really scary to the boys. And unfortunately, there's been over 50 confirmed suicides because they've been so scared and so embarrassed to go tell their parents, or they're so worried that the pictures are going to get leaked and then their life is over. Yeah. So it's a very scary. In 2021, there was something like 139 reported cases of it. Yeah. Just this last year, there were over a couple 100,000. And Snapchat themselves reported that every month they have hundreds of thousands of these. Right. So it's usually Instagram and Snapchat. That's how they are found.
That's their platform.
That's a platform. And rarely does it get into iMessage, but it just happens so much faster than you would think. Right. Maybe a couple hours, maybe a couple minutes, could even be a day or two.
So Colin, with this is one where I want to stop and pause just for a second to say, okay, number one, anything parents could look for, because I know that if I'm a teenage boy and I just send a nude photo of myself, the last thing I want to do is say, hey, Mom, guess what? Yeah. So anything parents can look for. And number two, what can parents do here? Any suggestions?
Yeah, just more on the general side. The thing that these kids need the most, one is just a loving relationship. Yeah. And after researching and interviewing thousands of parents, what was so sad to see is I would interview parents and I'd say, tell me a little bit about your kid and some of the challenges that you're having or whatever it may be. And instantly it's just like negative. Yeah. They're not good at this. They can't do this. They don't listen. They're not a good brother. It's just, and like sometimes the kid is like sitting there, Right.
And right there in front of you as they're saying this.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And what these kids need is someone to believe in them, someone to see their potential. And that was something that my mom did just a world-class job at. Yeah. She had told me so many times growing up the potential that I had, how special I was.
Right.
And after hearing that so many times and how genuine it was, I started to believe it, and it affected my actions. It affected how I went about my day, the decisions that I made.
Sure.
So the best advice I could give for parents is just to love their kids, to see their potential, to inspire them to be their best self. And that'll change everything for them.
Sure.
And with that, they also have to have an amazing, loving relationship and talk to their child often.
Yeah.
So I have an uncle every single Sunday. Him and his uncle and aunt, they get together with each kid and they go over the week and they say, how'd everything go this week? Did you see anything you weren't supposed to? How did your test go? How's it going with this? Like just a check-in. And it's not awkward, and they do it so much that it's just natural.
Right.
And the kids talk to them about stuff.
Right.
If you don't have that relationship with your kids, that's when they don't go to you when things go wrong, which they will go wrong.
Yeah.
So just having that relationship makes all the difference.
I'm sure of that. And then obviously parents are probably looking for some cues too. Most parents can tell when their kid's off, or when you could tell that something's weighing on them.
Totally.
And that's, of course, a great time to have a conversation and to give them some assurance and some help and buoy them up. Colin, our audience is primarily LDS. And so from an LDS perspective, what are some of the spiritual consequences that occur when there's just an oversaturation of social media use? What would you say from what you've seen in your interviews?
Yeah. The biggest one for me is, a lot of parents will ask, are you anti-social media? Are you anti-technology? What are you doing for your kid? I'm not anti anything, really, right? Yeah. Specifically, especially technology. I think technology is an awesome enabler.
Yes.
What I am anti is anything that makes us less of who we are.
Yeah.
Which is a son and daughter of God.
Right.
And to me, every minute spent on social media, and I'm pretty extreme with it, but in my opinion, a lot of those things are net negative.
Yeah.
So why would you want to spend 7-8 hours of your day doing something that's a net negative?
Right.
Yes, it might have a couple positive effects, but the negatives outweigh the positive.
Right.
And to me, it just makes them less of who they are, which is what Satan ultimately wants, right? Who's the happiest that kids are spending 6 to 8 hours on a screen?
Yeah.
Satan.
Yeah.
Right? So he's kind of winning a little bit in that regard when it comes to our youth. Who wants kids to be outside playing, learning, growing, right? Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
Learning to help each other and care for each other.
One of the things I see as well, Colin, to add to what you're saying, is obviously what they're exposed to on social media is going to have an impact on what kind of, how they feel about themselves. If it's pornographic or whatever, of course that's going to have an impact. But one of the things that I worry about from my research is that we're starting to have a generation that just doesn't really know how to work, and we see a lot of that, right? And I'm grabbing that from our own personal experience in our life, because our children were teenagers right as phones were kind of really, it was becoming that every teenager had a phone,
Right.
And I still remember walking into my living room one day and a couple of our kids were on their phones, and these are flip phones in those days, But I remember stopping and saying, time out, guys, if you have time to do this, we have a garage to clean. We've got a backyard to fix up. But I do believe that if you're really spending 6 to 7 hours a day outside of school, then there's no possible way, number one, you're getting your schoolwork done, right? But number two, what kind of work are you engaged in? Like you said earlier, what kind of extracurricular activities are you involving yourself in that really could have a contribution to making you the kind of person we hope you'll be? Elder Quentin L. Cook gave a talk years ago called I don't think it was called Frivolous Foolishness. I think it was called Choose Wisely.
Oh, yeah.
But he talked about frivolous foolishness in the talk, and
sure.
He was talking about the overuse of social media. And he said, I know one father who will ask his children, does this make you a better person? Kind of how you were kind of talking about, but does this make you a better person in any way? You've just spent 2 hours scrolling through social media. Are you better for that now? There's no possible way that you are.
Totally.
Anyway, and so yeah, thank you. I know there could be some serious consequences for that. Let's talk about the next idea. And once again, this developed as I was reading iGen again, which is a book that we recommend for everyone. And then you also gave another recommendation on Gene Twins. It was on Dopamine Nation. I always say Gene Twins, but Gene Twingy. Okay. Yeah. But she talked about something that was really interesting, and you've talked about it as well, Colin, and that's that kind of the delay in maturity that we're seeing these days. And I don't know if she actually said it like this, but it was almost like an 18-year-old, in the 1970s and 80s would be more like a 14-year-old in the world today. You talked about dating and driver's license and those type of things. And so we're seeing this, some have called it kind of the Peter Pan syndrome of not growing up. But what would you share, how are smartphones in the way of our children progressing, growing, and developing?
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you brought up the Peter Pan analogy. Because I think it's a great analogy to what's happening to the youth right now. So just to recap, for those who haven't watched Peter Pan in a while.
Yeah, and I'm one of those. So.
But Peter goes to Neverland, right?
Yeah.
And he has a couple options. He meets the family, right, with Wendy, and he has an opportunity to go to London and actually have a life and a relationship with Wendy, and go through trials and hard things and grow up. But he chooses to stay in Neverland.
Yeah.
And he chooses what's easy. And the way that I think about this, and it goes back to what we just talked about of kids not being able to kind of go through hard things right now, is at the moment, if you're going through something difficult, or maybe like you're working on a problem, you can either choose to stay in that problem or go through that thing difficult, or you can choose to go to Neverland, which is a make-believe place, and basically escape, right?
Just be 14 years old for the rest of your life.
Well, what I mean by that is, you could be working on homework, and then instead of like trying to finish it or like, it's like, hey, this is really tricky, I need to think through it. I could just go on my phone and escape.
There you go.
The current reality and what's actually happening.
Yes.
And now what it's training our brain to do, talking about the rewiring, is now kids aren't able to handle hard things because they can immediately go and escape. And
they can go to Neverland on their phone, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
and adults as well, right?
Yeah, totally. So that's my theory as to why like the youth, like we're just not having as many kids, right?
Yeah.
And it's like we just can't do as hard of things. And my parents laugh at us of how much paternity leave we have, and like back in your generation, the dad went back to work the next day, right? And we need like 6 months, and so we just we're not as tough. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because we can escape so easily.
Right. That's a great insight, and I do think it's delaying the idea of maturing. This is even one of the things that Jean talks about in iGen is that, and I don't want this to sound wrong, but she said there's actually been quite a de-escalation in fights in schools.
Yes.
And once again, we're not promoting that at all.
Right.
But there was just a lot more aggression in those days and risk-taking back to that, where today we just... And once again, happy that not everyone's fighting. And we're not promoting that, but we're just making an observation of how safety conscious we've become.
Right.
And we're just not prone to taking risk, So
yeah, well said.
I think Colin, the great takeaway for us today is going to be this next little section right here as we kind of head to the finish line of what parents can do. What should parents be doing to monitor phone use, to monitor social media, because if there's any parents out there listening right now and thinking, well, I don't think we need to do that, that's on our kid, that's a huge mistake, right? You've just handed your kid a loaded gun at age 4 and said, good luck with that,
Totally.
And so for parents to be responsible, we have to manage this in some way, this technology. So what are some of your thoughts?
Well, first, I would just say I have so much empathy for both the kids and the parents.
Right.
Because these are the first generations who are learning to deal with all of this. And what a difficult time to be a first-time parent or a first-time teenager,
Right.
And Satan's just working so hard 24/7
Right.
to really hurt us. So cut yourself some slack, right? Realize
Right.
that you're doing a great job.
And you're trying to battle a whole culture here that's not easy
totally.
to do.
And it's really hard when your kid says, I'm the only one without an iPhone in my grade, right?
Right.
And like you want to be on your kid's side. And so I would say that the first one is just for the parents to get as educated as they can.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Haidt is an amazing author who talks about the dangers of social media. He's got some great books. The Anxious Generation just came out a year ago.
Yeah.
Awesome book. Gene Twangy, really good.
Yeah.
I like Arthur Brooks a lot, just on
I do too.
happiness and how to construct a life.
Yeah.
So I would say that's number one. Two, I would say parents they need to put a plan together for their family of things that they, want to tolerate or put a line on, and other things that maybe the kids can decide for themselves and learn.
Yeah.
Me and my wife have always talked about, if we want our kids to be able to make mistakes in the home, so that those can be learning experiences, for the future. And then third is you've got to put a plan together as a family.
Yeah.
And this is a big one that parents don't often do. Usually the parents will say, all right, we've talked about this and this is what we're doing. And you know what the kid wants to do to that plan? The exact opposite.
Right.
So what's really cool is if you can get the teenager actually involved in the decision making, and the whole family comes up with a plan together.
Yeah.
So at Gabb, right, we hear so many things. One thing that we had heard recently was a family who watched, I always forget, the Netflix put together a documentary that showed kind of the dangers of social media.
Yeah.
A family watched that together, and then it was so influential to the teen that the teen actually led the family in like, hey, let's stop using our phones that much. Let's have this like 8 p.m. bedtime for all of the devices. So if it can be the teen's idea, the effectiveness is 5 to 10-fold than if the parents are just saying, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I like what you're saying, and of course, just good general rules of thumb. No screens in bedrooms. I like the idea you talked about delaying social media as long as we can. I know that in Jonathan Haidt's book, he talks about the age of 16, I think, of maybe that's a good time to let them have social media as a privilege. Creating some primetime family time where there's interaction and there's face-to-face conversation. I think one of the things I see parents do, number one, is they forget who pays for the cell phone, because parents, you own those phones, right? And so, and I've always had that idea in mind, and our kids were understood very much so that, guys, this is my phone that I'm actually letting you use.
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's not a right.
Exactly. And so we talked about it that way. But the other thing I see parents do a lot through my counseling work is come in pretty strong on laying down some groundwork, some ground rules. And I like that you talked about kind of the idea of participation, right? Where the kids are involved in that as well. But they lay out the rules and then kind of forget about them within a few weeks. And now that one kid that the parents said, oh yeah, we're on top of this, we're watching this close, is basically doing whatever they want 2 weeks later, and the parents are completely out to lunch on that. And so,
it's a part-time job for the parents.
It
is hard, right? When you've got so much to do and so much to manage.
Right.
Which is why I'm so in favor of having the teens actually lead out on it and kind of make the decisions for themselves.
Totally. I think that's such a great idea. Hey, Colin, this has been so great visiting with you today. And once again, just someone with your expertise, someone who is one of the founding fathers of Gabb, and all the research and all the data that you've kind of compiled over the years. And this has been great wisdom that you're passing on to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The way that we like to end every podcast with our LDS, let's do something. Colin, what do you think? What can we invite the parents out there listening today, and even grandparents, to do?
One of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Mead, and she said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has."
Wow.
So if you think about all the change, the big dramatic change that has happened, it usually is a small group of people,
Right.
that stand up and say enough is enough.
Yeah.
And so it's so hard for parents to say no when their kid's the only one without an iPhone.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is if other parents can band together, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, some of my friends have an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to say no than I'm the only kid that's not.
Yeah.
So I would just advise parents to get together with other parents and choose to delay and choose to give your kids a happy and outdoor childhood.
Yeah.
It's so sad that that's what standing up means, but that's kind of where we're at in the world and in society.
Go out there and build a treehouse with your kids, right? I mean, I love that outdoor recommendation. So, Colin, thank you once again for being with us. This has been great, and we'll have to have you on again.
Thank you so much.